Welcome, everyone, to Awesome Truth, a wrestling book club. I'm your host, Steve Semino, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Walt Schwenk. Hey, Walters.
Hello, Steven. How's it going?
My friend, it is going very well. We are back on Awesome Truth, and today we are talking about a documentary, Walt. We are returning to the WWE 24 series. We're going back to network documentaries, though the network does not exist. This is very much in the vein of the many, many, many documentaries we've talked about in the past. And today, the subject of that documentary, of course, is former World Heavyweight Champion Damian Priest.
Yeah, no, I'm sure at some point we said we wouldn't go back to this for a while. And
As if that's ever a thing that we can stand up to or be true to.
Also, we probably should have recorded this before, recent events where Damian Priest. Now this documentary felt very dated.
This only debuted a month ago, I think. It looks like it debuted in early August. So at least
a lot has changed.
Yeah, a lot has changed. It's their fault for putting this out. I'm sure they had an idea. I mean, everyone knew he was losing the belt in Germany, right? It was pre-Germany.
No, it was LA, right? Or no, SummerSlam, which was
SummerSlam. But it was in advance of the Germany show. And that was kind of everyone's idea, right? That like, okay, Priest gets a few months here, I guess a month or 2 months, but he's ultimately going to lose it to Gunther, which, it seemed like the logical outcome that we all predicted.
Yeah, I mean, which honestly was mutually beneficial because now he's on this like Judgment Day run, and then Gunther just has the belt, and it's badass. So
yeah,
it
worked out great. I mean, that's the one thing I will say. My takeaway from this, and like Damian Priest is a good subject because he's someone we've really never talked about. He's someone who has always been on like the periphery of the main event or of like being interesting. And, he was for a while there, he was the, fourth most interesting person in Judgment Day for probably all of Judgment Day. I mean, it depends on your Finn Balor opinion, but he was certainly not like, he didn't always seem like the breakout star. But I think he also, at the same time, made and now certainly makes the most sense as like the breakaway guy who's going to come out and blow up, like he just seemed like more than anything, he needed some reason to like exist. Like he never really seems like he has the best angle or the best character, but when you give him motivation and something to do, he really seems to run with it very well.
I mean, the Judgment Day has been such a saving grace for him because I think when he first debuted on the main roster, he had like the Bad Bunny rub for the first few months. But then kind of fell into the same pitfalls that most other like NXT stars run into. It's like, oh, I'm just a smiley babyface. People were happy to see me kind of graduate, but now I'm just like, now we've like leaned too far into the fact that like, oh, people were happy to see me, but like that doesn't mean that's not my character. Is like I'm happy to be here and I'm super smiley, like.
Are you thinking of Apollo Crews when you say that?
I'm thinking of a lot of people, but yeah, Apollo Crews is definitely number one with a bullet in that sense. But I do remember when I think it was very early in his run on the main roster. It was like a couple of years ago, and my now wife, but at the time, I think she was my fiance at the time. She went to a wrestling show without me, and her brother got tickets to this event through work, and very sadly I wasn't around for this event, so she was kind of left to like figure out wrestling by herself. And she was saying like, she's giving me a recap. She's like, yeah, there's this like Puerto Rican guy, and then there's this like older blonde guy they kind of put them together, and it feels like people like the old blonde guy, but it feels even more like they want me to like this Puerto Rican guy because he's with the old blonde guy.
Who's the old blonde guy?
Well, at the time it was Edge.
Oh, the old blonde guy.
And I'm just
like Ric Flair. I was like, who is she talking about?
It was really funny to hear that recap because like we've seen that a million times in wrestling where it's like, oh, we're gonna put these two together. And we know you like this one guy, and then hopefully you like the other guy by proxy. And it's like even she, who's never really spent much time thinking about wrestling, is like, yeah. So this is what they were trying to do, and I don't know if it really worked because I don't like.
And she could sense the aura immediately of it being manufactured, right? She was like, "This is a plan, and I don't think I like it."
but that was Damian Priest for a long time. Like that essence that she tried to capture was like his reality. And it was kind of part of this documentary too, where they kind of say like this guy had something, but he never figured out how to be comfortable or be himself or be a version of himself that was like interesting. And as a result, we're just going to throw you with edge until people maybe like you. It's like,
yeah,
you know.
I had forgotten that Judgment Day was formed at the end of a shitty Mania match with AJ and Edge. And then Priest was just there and then does some shit and everyone goes, huh? And then it starts this stable that is going years later. And like, you know, now one of the hottest things, you know, the whole, you know, environment around them is one of the hottest things they have going. So it is wild that was the impetus. It's some really like shaky crap, like a run in at the end of a bad Mania match or a you know, subpar Mania match.
Well, the whole Judgment Day has been very unsuccessful. They had one, like they cashed in and they won a few tag belts, but like even when Finn Balor became the lead of this like team, Finn Balor had lost the night before in like a 6-man tag and then becomes the leader of the Judgment Day and then they turn on Edge. But it's like, wait, you guys.
And then Edge beat him a whole bunch, as I think we've talked about before. Edge just kept beating him over and over again.
Yeah, ad nauseum Edge would just get wins over this guy. I'm like, they aren't an impressively formidable group, but for some reason people really like them. I think it's just by being on Raw for so long, people kind of just like really started to like them.
I mean, they've been great. They have, you're right. They've not been like a necessarily threatening or successful in quotes because it's right. Like, you know, they don't win matches necessarily, but look at the people that have gotten bumps since joining, you know, Dom and Rhea and Priest, like, I mean, Finn, not so much, but those other three went from being like respectable and in Rhea's case already like a champion level person to now like, you know, stars, like capital S stars. And it's not necessarily because of Judgment Day. I want to say like, it's not like Judgment Day was super cool and now we like them. It just seemed like it was just a weird fertile grounds to develop all those stories, you know, like they've done very well with sort of the meager stories and the meager like in-ring success they've been given. And now all of a sudden coming out of this all, those three are all huge, and a bunch of people who are now attached to those people are huge, and like it's just amazing how they've made an ecosystem out of really not much.
Yeah, I mean, would JD McDonough have a job in wrestling right now if not for the Judgment Day?
And he's a guy like people give a shit about. Like he's just some cruiserweight they brought up from NXT, and he's a wrestler of consequence now.
Yeah, I mean, just by proxy, but you know, still like. They made it work, and that's, I guess, a success story.
Yeah, and they gave Priest the belt, you know, which is, again, it wasn't like it was a very well-timed run, I would say. Like, it's a recognition of, you know, his I think it gives him a little bit of a better aura now, obviously, like he's a former world champion. There was the whole, they talk about in the documentary, he was starting to get clowned upon by randos on the internet, so not a huge deal, but people were going on like is this guy ever going to cash in? Like, is this just one of those wasted briefcase runs? And he obviously made something out of it, so he gets that rub. And like, I think it's just, he's coming out of this now as like somewhat of a guy of import. Like, we'll see what he does now. Is he going to become another smiley babyface? Are they going to be able to extend this once he stops being mad at Judgment Day, which I may be wrapping up right now as we speak? Like, what does he do next? I mean, that's probably a question for the end of this show, but he does, like, I would say this, it's not weird to see a WWE 24 about Damian Priest, you know? And I would say a year ago, I would not have given a shit, and I'd be like, we're not going to cover this because who cares about this guy? And now I'm like, okay, like, this is a guy who's obviously, he's got a decent story out of the ring, and in the ring, he is a, you know, top 10 WWE wrestler of consequence. So he's someone I'm interested to talk about.
Yeah, with regards to this documentary, it was interesting to hear his story, because like, or to see his story unfold, I should say.
We heard some of it too. We heard some.
Yeah, I mean, it's a visual and audio medium. But I'll say though, it's like to see his story unfold, because he he is an important guy, and it was, you know, I wonder how long ago it's one of those things where it's like, do they have all this footage and they just put together this documentary with some like new interviews, or did they have this like runway of like, oh, we're going to tell his story, and so let's capture all these pivotal moments? I mean, but you look at the last like this main roster run, it's like they did give this guy a lot of big moments. Like pairing anybody with Bad Bunny, suddenly they're going to be like considered important, like just with all the eyeballs on it. So
it's definitely one of those scenarios where it's. I hate to pin somebody with this label, but it certainly seems like they brought him up initially because he's Puerto Rican. And they're like, it would behoove us, because we have a Puerto Rican guy on the roster, to put him with Bad Bunny for this big match and, and just get the rub from that. So makes sense. Like, it's certainly, they've done it a million times before with wrestlers of various ethnicities to varying levels of success. But it is like, but it's one of those wrestling, truisms. Like, you get your chance, you got to run with it. Like, it almost doesn't matter why. A lot of the time, You're here, you're on the main roster. Like, good luck. And it's a stop start type situation. But like you said, it's still not nothing. Like, if he had no chops, they still might not have risked bringing him up. Like, he had the size, he had the look, he had a lot of things going for him. And it just, that gets your foot in the door more often. Like, Baron Corbin can attest to this. Like, if you have some of those things, these innate, abilities, or these innate attributes that you can't really teach, then it does get you a chunk of the way there. And then the rest is probably up to you.
Right. And you're right. The ethnicity play is important, especially because they had that huge PLE in Puerto Rico. And like, yeah, I mean, who else are you going to put there? But I mean, that crowd certainly made you feel like, oh shit, this is like an untapped market that we should be really like capitalizing on. These people just fucking went insane for these two. Also too, just the fact that like hearing his story and seeing it unfold with his family, learning about his like crazy weight gains and just like all the stop start and all the seeing his struggle specifically, because like he's not young. He's not a young guy. He's like kind of old. And so, the fact that he's even having this run at all is kind of miraculous in a sense that like, I know that WWE stars are skewing older now, and like with modern medicine and better protein powders. I don't know, like this, cross the invention of CrossFit. These people are DDP yoga. They're suddenly like in their 40s and still like stars. And like the Kevin Owens weren't young necessarily coming into the company, but like he was, 3 years ago he was in his like mid to late 30s and like hadn't.
He's 41 right now. He's about to turn 42. He turns 42 right after this episode comes out. So
he's been on the main roster for like 3 years. This guy's a 39-year-old rookie at some point, and it's just like, or 38-year-old rookie. Like, I don't know. That's like not young. That's really not young. And so it's just crazy that they were like, all right, let's give him a chance now. It's like you missed out on like 15 years of Damian Priest because you never because of all of the chances he had to become a WWE superstar, and then they said, not ready. You're not ready yet. You're not ready yet. Go back to the Monster Factory.
Yeah, he really we've heard so many of these stories. Obviously, coming up in the indies, struggling to make ends meet, working in developmental, like
sleeping in your car,
and but I was gonna say a lot of them, are like, not that they're not harrowing. I'm sure it was exhausting and scary for almost all of them, because wrestling is such a fickle industry and the money is really not there until you make WWE or now AEW or somewhere of note. But some of the stories, like they're not like, there's Eddie Kingston's story, which is obviously top of the charts, like insane. Yep. And then I'd say Priest's story is right underneath that, where it's like, this guy had actual hardships, like Becky's story in the book we just read. It's, she had a hard road, and she, made it for a little bit and then disappeared and then had to fight her whole way back and rediscover her love for wrestling and sort out her mental issues and all that. But like, it's still like, it does not match what Priest went through, which just seems like a genuine decades of trying to make it, and being out of shape and struggling with your own stuff. Like there's a longevity to his quest to, like you said, to make the roster, to make WWE, that is impressive in its own right, because you're like, so many people would have just quit by now, and any logical person probably would have quit. Because just like you don't make the main roster at 38. Like that just is insane.
Now let me ask you this, because they made it a point to kind of say throughout this, like, oh well, at some point Paul Heyman came up to this guy and was like, oh yeah, let's get Priest involved, or like he had a relationship with like X-Pac and Scott Hall before he passed away.
Yeah, great to see X-Pac just showing up randomly. Like, oh, you doing X-Pac? Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah.
but like, those guys were like, yeah, we wanted to mentor this guy. We saw, like, they saw something in him. And it's just, even the Undertaker in NXT is like, seemed to have gravitated. I don't know if that was revisionist history, but it seemed like he started to see something in him too. Like, what do you think these people all saw in this guy that I would assume led to WWE eventually taking a chance on him?
It's a good question. And the documentary, I mean, the obvious one, if you're just looking at his stats on Wikipedia, he's listed at 6'5", 250. So I mean, 6'5" alone gets your foot in the door too, right? Like, they don't have a lot of 6'5" guys anymore. Like, they used to have many. It used to be almost a prerequisite. You had to be 6'3", 6'4", something like that to even make a dent. But now that's not the way it works anymore. But I'm sure, not just Vince, but really anybody would love to have a big guy, So I have to imagine size is a big part of it. But the other part of it, though, is he's not good on the mic. He's real when he can be, but like a lot of the interviews they showed us in this, you realize, like, this guy didn't get this job because he's good on the stick. This guy didn't get it. We didn't bring him in because he cuts a good promo. So it's really more, I guess it's about the aura and the presence and like the hard work, right? Like, it's sort of cliche to say because they all work pretty hard. But I imagine the tenacity, like, he just didn't stop. And I have to imagine at some point, they're like, this guy is paying his due. They love guys who pay their dues, And you look at his resume, you're like, the one thing we can say about him is he's big and he paid his dues. So I have to imagine that got him, a bunch of the way there.
I mean, I hate to keep bringing this up, but they paired one of the biggest music celebrities in the world with this guy, like, to wrestle with him and then to wrestle against him. And this, I don't know if it says more about Bad Bunny or Damian Priest or anyone, but like, the Bad Bunny matches, they let him do a lot of different shit. Like, so it's, there's got to be some level of trust at that point with him. And which is weird because it's like, I understand with the Miz. Miz has been in the WWE system since like the early 2000s or mid 2000s. So,
you mean, like, how Miz always gets the celebrity spot because they know he'll take care of the celebrity?
And he's also comfortable showing ass and yada yada yada.
Yeah.
So I get all that, but like, there's also a reason to give Miz that trust too. It's because, like, it's the Miz. He's been around forever. He knows how to take care of someone in that position. But like, Damian Priest hadn't been around for that long, and so it's it's interesting to see. Like, I think you've nailed it on the head why he was the logical choice. But like, that's still like it says a lot, right? Does it not? I mean,
yeah, it does. And it, like, there is, like you said, there's a trust in doing that. And Priest is not the kind of person, at least from, this documentary, which he seems like a pretty genuine person. I don't get the sense he's putting on a lot of airs. Doesn't seem like the kind of thing he would do based on his upbringing and his family and everything. But he does not take a ton of credit for these things. Like, you would think that, but they show him literally training Bad Bunny, going over the match, doing all this stuff. And like you said, Bad Bunny on the very short list of like excellent celebrity performers, like guys who can actually put on, and girls, but mostly guys who can put on an actual match in the ring despite just being, a musician or a celebrity of some sort. But that's on I'm sure other people were involved, but I mean, like you said, Priest is in the ring with him 2 times in a row and he's 2 for 2. So like, but the fact that Priest doesn't take any credit for it and just views it as an opportunity to get himself, happy to be there, great to be involved. Like, thanks to the company for putting me there. Like, there's a I'm trying to think of the right word. It's not complacency. That's way too harsh of a word, but there's like a demureness to him, like he's very comfortable giving other people credit. And like, I would say in wrestling, that's usually not good because it's like a cutthroat bunch of weirdos back there, who I think would view that as weakness. But maybe let's cross our fingers that in maybe the H era, it's like, no, this guy is good to work with. Like, he is a nice person and like, he will not step on your throat or hurt you or fuck up anything involved in the match with you because he's not that kind of guy. And I think that maybe that comes across, and that's why they give him these opportunities. Is like, this is the kind of guy we want people to work with, certainly a celebrity, because we know he's gonna take care of them in sort of his own way,
He definitely seems like an H guy, does he not?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Like H has his guys, and like That is definitely from, even though he's a little bit on the later NXT era, H had his like Kevin Owens back in the day, like clearer guys. But certainly, I can't imagine he would be where he is right now. Although Vince gave him the first Bad Bunny match, that was, I assume, under the Vince era. I don't remember who. I can't remember specifically Vince eras, given that there was like obviously a brief moment there where Vince returned. Yeah, but yeah, he definitely obviously won the belt under Vince. Like the whole Judgment Day thing is, under H. The whole Judgment Day thing is under H. Like I imagine he's an H guy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the way they kind of, maybe it's just like how the documentary presents those moments, but like it seems like he's a Triple H guy.
But let's say now, watching this documentary again, like you noted this a little bit too, and we've made fun of these documentaries before because they seem to be made like they don't sync them up well with the events that they have control over in the ring. Like they do a documentary and nothing of consequence happens, or it doesn't happen in the right timeline, and you're like, wait, why did they make this documentary if it doesn't sync up with the title win or the retirement match or any number of things that it could? Instead, it's just like, here is 20 days in their life or whatever. Like, obviously this is certainly doesn't confine itself to that sort of short timeline, but still they put it out after he won the belt. So at least we have winning the belt as part of the story. But now that Priest has lost the belt, now that Priest is out of Judgment Day, what do you think is this guy's short-term and long-term future? What do you think his ceiling is in WWE?
I don't know if the Terror Twins is going to last much longer.
Is that what him and Rhea are called?
That, I believe, is their moniker currently.
Is this like they're not just friends to beat up Judgment Day? Or are they like embarking on a mixed tag team for reals? Or what's...
I think it's just that's their alliance, but I don't foresee this being like once we separate them to pursue other endeavors.
There it is. Terror Twins on Wikipedia. Wow. They have their own Wikipedia page. I don't think they need their own Wikipedia page.
Yeah, their illustrious history of all 5 weeks. I honestly don't know where they go with this because, and I think it really has more so to do with like, you're not going to stop hot, cold Gunther at this point. That doesn't make sense. So unless he switches brands, you are kind of just like floundering with the same 5 people in the mid card. So it's going to be really tough for them to overcome like this in the short term. Long term, you switch brands, you could pair them with someone else. You put them on SmackDown with Bloodline, and suddenly now that's a thing. Like, but you have a few steps before you start moving those chess pieces, and if he can survive the short term, like, what the hell do we do with this guy after we do like the 20th rubber match between him and like Finn Balor? Like, I don't know. I don't know what you do with him after that.
I will say the one thing that I wouldn't say it's to his credit, because obviously I'm sure he would want to be champion again. He would want to main event. He would want to be a top star. But like you said, he's going to be 42 in 2 weeks. So like, that caps him permanently, but it does. He doesn't need to, like, if he were to settle into like upper mid card status for a while and hang out for a few more years and be relevant, and certainly when they go to Puerto Rico, main event those shows, and hopefully get caught up in something else at a certain point, that's a very successful career. Like, that is good. Yeah. Like, it's that weird context thing where it's like, if he doesn't ever have the belt again, you can't look at his career and say he's a failure, because like, he had the belt at all. He got it so late, and in his run, like he sort of has I'm sure he wants to make a lot of money, so it's not a free pass, but he has sort of a lot of wiggle room here to, I think to be regarded as very, very successful, even if this is technically the peak of it all.
Yeah. I mean, it would have, I think looking back, like if he doesn't like nail this next 4 months, is it like, are we going to forget about Damian Priest forever? Like, no, he's carved his spot in recent history, for sure. And also, now I'm thinking about it, not the fantasy book, but it's like, could you get a few more months of like him and Drew rekindling? It feels like his title run was kind of just a lot of setup for other things happening. Like, him and Drew never really got like a proper feud because it was all just a backdrop for like Punk and Drew. Him and Seth didn't really get like a full actual program because it's all kind of the backdrop of something else happened. It's like, so you can revisit a lot of those matchups across Raw, and maybe you do find, oh, actually this guy and Drew are both like giant dudes who would put on like a banger of a match, and like now
there's a market for big. They've really leaned on the big meaty guys beating the crap out of each other in the last couple of years, way more than previous years. So he certainly fits that bill. If that's where they decide to go next, I think most people would want to see those two big boys go at it. So
under different contexts too, where it's not just like, when was CM Punk gonna run in? Like, like those guys are gonna need feuds after. Like, because like we only have another month of Punk and Drew before it's like, all right, you need to separate these two forever now.
Yeah, we're done. It's the bracelet angle has concluded. So
right.
I think Priest. I would say Priest. I mean, this is true of a lot of people. So again, not a slight on him, but I think he's always going to be a guy who needs to be surrounded by other girls and guys of note. Like I think, and like all those people, and that could mean opponents. That could mean a stable. That could mean a tag team with like, and with Rhea, but like, I don't think he's the kind of guy who should is ever really going to stand on his own. Again, for the mic thing and for, just generally, I don't think he's ever going to have that sort of cachet where it's going to be like Damian Priest is like headlining your show or headlining your angle on his own. Like Damian Priest versus another fascinating character, I think is a thumbs up for the most part. It's like even as a placeholder feud or as just a quick one-off or whatever, most people aren't going to get mad at that. But I do think he worked in Judgment Day so well again because he had Dom, you had Rhea, you had Finn, who again kind of sucks, but Finn and Priest have a lot of similarities too. Like neither one, I don't think anybody really like if you told me either one was your favorite wrestler, I'd look at you weird. But like they obviously have carved out their own spots and are very successful in their own way, and were important parts of this stable, and so they work in those contexts really well. And I think that's where he's gonna like, even if this is his peak, like you said, I think if he fights those guys, no one's gonna bat an eye and say, "Ew, what a bad second main event for this pay-per-view." They'll say, "Oh, sure, of course, Seth, why not?"
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like he's an asset to be used, and so it just comes to a point of like, what's the best use of this asset? The same, and honestly, like I think this exercise of figuring out Damian Priest in the next calendar year is similar to like 5 other people on the roster of Raw. Like,
yeah, I'm sure.
What are you doing with Seth tomorrow? Like, I don't know. Like, that's a good question too. Like, so this is kind of like, it's kind of a nice moment too, where everybody's kind of in between things. Randy just lost against Gunther, and so
everyone said that was a great match too. Everyone said that was a fantastic late career Randy match. So
great, yeah. If you need someone, he needs to fight someone. So great.
He's big. He's real big now. So if you're talking big boys, this is as big as Randy's ever been.
Wider than he is tall, which is
what's a good thing for Priest too in this particular era, in this particular, where WWE is right now. They, I think we talked about this on some of the previous pay-per-views. Like they're putting shows out there where they don't have headliners necessarily. Like we said, Cody versus Solo. Like Punk was obviously there, but like they're able to put shows out where they don't need to make superstars. Like they don't need Roman, they don't need Rock to come back. Like these things are not prerequisites because they're such a hot company right now, and things are going so well. The buzz is strong. They're riding waves of success. Like this is a great time for a Damian Priest to be around because they don't need to see him selling millions of dollars of merch to see value in him. Like they can say, yeah, he's big, he's strong, he's competent, like he's a good guy, he's a great locker room, like put him in the title run, give him a nice couple more years here near the top. Like I feel like there's probably a distinct lack of pressure on a lot of those upper mid-card guys now to just be themselves and not worry about busting out as a super duper star, because they just don't need it at this moment.
I mean, they'd be lucky if the Terror Twins merchandise sold hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, I would also, unless you were perhaps Puerto Rican or maybe from New York, like if you had some connection to Damian Priest beyond I like him as a wrestler, I could understand getting one of his t-shirts. But if I saw just some dude wearing a Damian Priest shirt on the street, I'd be like, what are you doing here? I don't know. Like,
Well,
you really
yeah.
like Damian? Like, I don't think merch. I'm sure it has like a lot of fire and other stuff on it. Like, I don't think it's the merch that I would personally value. Maybe someone out there would, but yeah, I don't think he's burning up the tables.
What would you rather wear, a Damian Priest shirt or an an Orton Antlers shirt from circa 2008?
That's a really. Can I wear the 2008 shirt now in 2024? Because then it has like weird, like semi nostalgia value.
Sure. Yeah, you'd be wearing this every day for the rest of your life.
Because if you saw someone on the street wearing an Orton Antler shirt, I think you'd be pumped about that. You go, Orton Antlers, wow.
I would have to reach into the depths of my brain to even uncover a memory to remember that Orton had an antler phase.
It's also really hard to say Orton Antlers.
It's
really
impossible for me to say clearly. Oh, the one thing I was to say about this doc is I really enjoyed the fact that it went from like a Damian Priest doc to just kind of like this general overview of like the Judgment Day and how we got here and
how supportive they were of each other. That was really sweet to see. Like they clearly cared a lot about the other members.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that too. I'm like, yeah, this is really nice. I would hope they care. It's like, do you think like Scott Norton gave a shit about like
when like
Stevie Ray
when Buff won the U.S. title or whatever?
Yeah, do you think those people cared one iota about that? Like there was like soulless, but like I did feel something watching these guys interact and talk about like how they rooted for each other's successes.
Yeah, it's like what Mox would talk about in his book about the Shield and all that. Like it's nice to see actual camaraderie, especially around a bunch of people who are thrown into a stable for no reason at all. Like I assume the Bloodline guys love hanging out because they're all related to each other. Like so I could see it'd be fun to hang out with your cousins and wrestle all the time. But Rhea Ripley and Damian Priest and JD McDonough and all these dudes, they didn't know each other at all. Or maybe they were like, friendly, but all of a sudden it's probably like, hey, they're your stable person. You have to tag with them every night. You travel with them every week. And, so they probably had to form a nice, organic bond. And it seems to be real. And so that is very nice to see. That's good footage to put in one of these docs too. It adds a lot of depth and uniqueness too, to stories we've heard variations of, pretty frequently.
Dominic Mysterio is like, I love this man. It's like, dude, your dad is like literally like down the hall. What are we talking about here? But
I also love when Dom gives interviews now and he has like his ridiculous getup because he has the ridiculous hair and the mustache, but he's not talking in like his wrestling voice. He's talking like he's a 25-year-old guy and he's just like, he's trying to be real and he looks outrageous and he's not, it's very funny to see that sort of mix of like him just being like, oh yeah, I'm just a normal man when I'm not playing the biggest like shit-eating heel in the company.
Yeah, no, it's great to see more of him and see that. So that's the part of like, oh yeah, like this is where we started. This is where we came from with Judgment Day. The Judgment Day. Well, I can't speak at all today.
Yeah, like we said, it's a weird stable that has always obviously played second fiddle to Bloodline in terms of importance, and like you said, in terms of matches. Besides Rhea and Dom's shtick, like it's not. I don't think anybody would call it the favorite part of the show, but I think we mentioned previously as well, like the angle when Damian and Rhea came out and beat them up, post SummerSlam was great. Like that was just like, whoa, the crowd is white hot. Like they were basically in the main event slot. Like they were the most important people on the show that night. Like that was great. And maybe they'll never, that might not last forever, but it is wild how they've stood out. They've been around this long and they're able, like I said, they're able to take advantage of the few moments where they have like something cooking. Yeah. Like they don't really matter. We're not going to tell our kids about the Judgment Day, but they're nice to have around. Like I'm overall way more optimistic and positive on them than I thought it would be a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, people seem really invested.
Yeah, so. And like we said, we'll see where this goes. It's probably got I know they already won in Berlin, right? The Terror Twins.
They did win, yes.
So I mean, you think that angle is over now, right? Like they've beaten them up. So I know Rhea needs to win the belt. So that is a thing Rhea has to do, or pursue the belt. But like Priest, like what does he want to do? Just keep beating them up? Like he beat him. I guess he'll face Finn at some point, but it doesn't seem like there's much more hills for them. There's really one more hill each, and then that's the end.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's fine. That doesn't need to last forever. But
we're
yeah,
gonna reset across the board. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll see what they do from there. But it is like I said, it's nice when we first mentioned doing the pre-stock. My reaction was like, okay, like this is a space filler. You know, this is like, and it's an hour long, and like it's gonna be a slog. And now that we watched it, I was like, that was very good. Like I like knowing more about this guy, and I'm glad we got to cover him. It's someone we would not have talked about otherwise, and like it's someone worth talking about. So
yeah, I mean, I think
it's a treat. Would you call it a treat?
Yeah, it was a treat. It was short and sweet. Short.
It was a short, sweet treat. Yeah, it was like a Werther's original. You know, it was a piece of saltwater taffy.
I would love to dissect your treat meter.
I was gonna say, we waited this long, but what if we started doing that? Like, if I said treat and you would go, what kind of treat is it? And I have to think up like treat options.
Yes.
That's a good. Maybe we'll incorporate that now that we're 200 episodes in. We'll start using that more.
We'll have to really build this out in an infographic or some sort of like.
Yeah, then it's like, okay, so it's like a piece of gum. Like, is a piece of gum better than like a Werther's? Like, is a piece of gum better than a candy cane? Like, we'll have to really build a power ranking of sort.
I sure hope it is. Candy canes are garbage, but
yeah,
that's pretty bad. That's my treat meter. Sorry,
yeah,
that's my treat.
That's right. To each treat meter their own. You know, very specific.
Exactly.
Well, WWE 24, Damian Priest is the man's name, is on Peacock right now. It's a treat. It's a mild treat, and it's worth watching, I would say. So go watch it, and we'll see what Damian does next. But if he's of any consequence, hopefully we'll talk about him a little more, and we'll see how they wrap up his various storylines going forward. So who knows? We will see. If you want to hear more of us talking about documentaries, many of them from years past and currently, you can find our archives at awesometruth.libsyn.com. You can also subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and everywhere podcasts are delivered. We are there. Old episodes and new are all available for you. Walt, great to talk to you about Damian Priest. Great to watch a network doc. The network lives on in very small ways in terms of occasional documentaries on Peacock that have the network vibe. So, hooray.
Yeah, this was... I keep saying
it was networkian in nature, right?
It was WWE Network content fodder with a capital N for network. I don't know.
Capital W, capital N, capital C.
It was solid, real solid.
Well, thank you all so much for listening, and remember, the truth will set you free.